Hello and welcome to the video. Today we have another fantasy short story, this time with a devilishly hard monster fight. So if you haven't already, please hit the like button and comment any feedback you have. Otherwise, on with the tale. The New King of Morrow Marsh Part 3, written and narrated by Henry Tallow. Darkness, light, darkness again. Taryn's eyes tried to adjust to the changing light conditions. The cavern the misfits of Arundel had found themselves in was nearly pitch black, except for a small spear of light that shone through where a tiny stream must have carved a channel through to the surface. They were currently revolving slowly inside the net that had snared them only moments before, which was now suspended from the ceiling of the large cavern. Every few moments, the net would swing around again, and the beam of light would shine on Taryn's face, leaving him almost blind when he swung back into the darkness. Taryn thought they were surely to be eaten, that the game was up. But apparently, the young princess's newfound channeling abilities allowed her to communicate with the terrifying Rat King. Taryn could only see glimpses of the monster, but what he did see chilled even his battle-hardened blood. It was as large as a man, and it stood on its hind feet. Most of its face was covered by a hooded robe that, to Taryn, seemed to be made out of the thick hides of the giant rats that were the king's minions. The only visible features were the thing's grey-streaked snout and its long, yellow-stained incisors. It hobbled about, leaning on a staff that curled around itself, perhaps made of a gnarled tree root. When the king of the rats gnashed its teeth, or spoke in its own monstrous tongue, the dozen or so hound-sized rats around the chamber would echo its hideous chattering and skittering around. Taryn thought they may have a chance against this foe, if only they could get free of the netting. It was thick and made of something leathery and rough, and Taryn hoped it was again the hides of those disgusting creatures and not something else. "What is the beast saying now?" Artair said, unable to keep fear from his tone. "Stop with the name-calling. The king can understand you. His royal majesty just refuses to speak our language," Thalia said through pursed lips. "Oh, that's just wonderful," Taryn hissed, as he tried in vain to get at his dagger. The weight of the others pressed him into the netting with so much force he thought that if he passed out, he would stop breathing altogether. "Do you think you can tell the king to let us down?" Taryn said with effort. "I think I'm going to suffocate if I'm like this much longer." The Rat King spoke and the chattering of the minions swelled once again. It was clear they were excited. "He says that suits them just fine. Now, if you will excuse me, I'm trying to save our lives," Thalia snapped in reply. Thalia tried to pull herself up a little higher in the net, so she wasn't putting all her weight on Taryn and the other two. She didn't think she weighed all that much, but with the three of them all piled on at the same time, she could imagine it would be a strain. She certainly wasn't muscly, and after the ordeal they had been through over the past 2 days, she wasn't at her strongest, so even lifting her own body weight was a challenge. Still, she managed to transfer some of her weight onto the side of the net. That would do for now. She had more important things to deal with than Taryn being a bit uncomfortable. She had been able to sense the Rat King's presence since they had gone a few levels below the surface. Now that she was within eyeshot, his voice was loud and proud in her head. "And why should I not simply let my brood eat you? They are always hungry, and fresh meat is so hard to come by in our domain," the Rat King spoke inside her head. "Firstly, O great king of rats, where I come from, Members of different royal families exchange pleasantries before making threats. Thalia pushed out with her mind. My name is Princess Thalia, heir to the throne of Arundel, and these are my companions, the misfits of Arundel. Whom am I conversing with? She thought back to the few times she'd been allowed to visit the court, when her father would see petitioners or dignitaries from other kingdoms. She had always wanted to go along and learn, but her father forbade it. He said she was still too young, and that for her to comprehend what transpired, she needed to study more. She thought that quite funny now. He would have sent her off to the ominous Channeling College before she had a chance to learn how the court actually operated anyway. Focus. Now is not the time to reminisce, Thalia thought, before the Rat King's voice was once again inside her head. Where are my manners? I am Netomna, king of all rats, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to my humble kingdom. Thalia stilled her heartbeat before replying. Maybe, if she could buy them some time, they might get out of here alive. And what a wonderful kingdom it is. We were admiring the crypt up above, and now, seeing this beautiful cathedral, it's simply divine, Thalia replied using her mind. It has been a long time since I have been paid a compliment by someone as well spoken as yourself, Princess Thalia. As the Rat King spoke, he hobbled from one side of the chamber to the other. In fact, it has been a very long time since I have spoken to anyone at all. It was only recently that I awoke from my long slumber. Thalia tried to smile, but it was difficult to appear regal when hanging inside a net. That is a shame, for you are quite the conversationalist. How long has it been, my dear King Netomna? Thalia asked. What is the current year? The Rat King paused and scratched his chin pensively. I believe it is the autumn of 2347 SD, she said. SD? The Rat King asked, as if trying to remember a long faded dream. Since discovery. Since the continent of Atronia was discovered and settled. These days the kingdoms are Arundel, Kennen, Ypres and Moor's End. Although there isn't much of Moor's End left, I'm afraid, Thalia recited, as if she were back with a history tutor. The names of those kingdoms mean nothing to me, but I do remember the fall of the kingdom of Bracken. It happened right before I was forced into my slumber. The Rat King stopped his pacing and sat down on a stone dais. The kingdom of Bracken? That can't be right. If I recall correctly, that happened over 500 years ago. Thalia said these words aloud instead of through her mind, before clamping her mouth shut and reminding herself to remain calm. What are you talking about 500 years ago? Arter said, shifting his weight. Our lovely host here seems to be quite... Thalia paused. Quite mature in years, she said to Arter. O great King Netomna, how is it that you came to build your kingdom here? Thalia said with her mind once more. I was born a normal rat, but my father was a great sorcerer, and he gave me what he called the gift. He taught me to speak and to act like a human. For many years I served him in his castle. Then a powerful magic started to spread throughout the land. Magic that either drove away or killed creatures like myself. The Rat King bowed his head.
for the crime of trying to keep me alive. The humans killed my father. With his dying act, he bade me escape. Still, I was not safe. I was hunted by the humans wherever I went.
Now the Rat King pounded the ground with his staff, and his minions started shuffling around again.
Once his distant relatives put my father to rest in the crypt above, and I had run out of places to hide. I broke my promise to my father, and I dug in the earth like a common rat. I dug down to where his coffin was entombed. Then I dug into this cavern and brought my father with me. I knew I couldn't go on living in this world. The magic was so strong at that stage, I couldn't escape it. So I curled up in my father's coffin and went into an extended hibernation, using his body to keep myself alive for all this time.
Finishing his monologue, he got to his feet again. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. It sounds awful," Thalia said with honest sympathy.
"Yes, it was,"
the Rat King sighed.
"But I sense that power is receding now. For the first time in a long time, I am able to freely move about."
Thalia's mind was racing with so many questions, but the Rat King broke the brief silence.
"It has been a pleasure to converse with you, Princess Thalia of Arundel. I feel jubilation at getting my woes off my chest. However,"
Thalia panicked. "Wait, listen. There is no need for this to turn unpleasant. Wouldn't it be good to have a member of the royal family on your side? We could be allies."
"I think not, my dear. The idea of ever trusting a human again,"
the Rat King shivered.
"I would consider it a betrayal of my father's memory. Goodbye, Princess, and goodbye to her friends."
And with that, the Rat King turned away and walked over to a small stream. The taka-taka sound of scratching claws and gnashing teeth grew into a deafening crescendo in the confined cavern. Briefly, Balanos thought to himself that this was going to be a nasty way to go. That was when Taran started shouting, "I am not going to die being eaten by rats." The large man began to wiggle underneath the 3 other bodies on top of him.
"We already tried that. If only I can—"
Balanos's words were cut short as the entire net slammed into the ground. The group of prisoners groaned and rolled off one another in an almost comical tumble. Balanos quickly recovered, rolling into a crouch, bow raised. Maybe the rats have let us down to make this a fair fight, if not more entertaining, Balanos thought. But no, there she was, Nessa, crouched a few paces away. She spun around, a long spear in her hand. Balanos wasn't sure how Nessa had done it, but somehow she must have reached out with her spear to cut the cord that had gathered the top of the net. "Get up and help me," Nessa shouted. Not pausing to ask questions, the misfits of Arundel sprang into action. Artair had his knife and grappling hook out, creating distance by snapping the hook out in arcs around the group. Taran lunged with his sword and shield, battering any rats that managed to come close to the group, and slashing and stabbing anywhere he saw an opportunity. Nessa was twirling her new spear around with one hand and shooting vines with the other, grabbing several rats around the waist before flinging them across the room. Arrows flew this way and that as Balanos, standing in the center with Thalia, shot as quickly and as accurately as he could. Channeling with all her strength, Thalia pulled rats into the air, creating perfect targets for Balanos's keen eyes. Balanos began to think they might have a chance in this fight after all.
Enough!
The Rat King shouted, this time aloud and in the common tongue. A strong wave of magic pushed the misfits hard against one of the side walls of the cavern. As she gained her footing, Nessa thought she could see some of the dead rats sliding along the ground. She paused for a moment. 10 or so of the dog-sized rats were creating a semicircle around the group of heroes, hiding whatever was happening behind them. Above the din of gnashing and scratching came the sound of breaking bones and dislocating tendons. Something was growing behind the line of rats. The party watched in horror as the skins of the dead rats were stretched open and the muscles, bones and ligaments seemed to fuse together. There was a monstrous howl that chilled Nessa right to the bone. With slow, lumbering steps, a grotesque monster stepped forward between two of the smaller rats. The creature stood on 2 mottled legs, and its head nearly reached the roof of the cavern. Its hands looked like tree trunks. Its fingers were bundles of bones. It had a maw that hinged wide enough to swallow someone whole, which was lined with jagged, shattered bones for teeth. A dozen pairs of red eyes stared out, snapping from one party member to the next. Nessa couldn't believe what she was seeing, but she didn't have long to consider. The monster staggered toward the group. With every step, the cavern shook. "Move!" Thalia shouted into everyone's mind. Broken from her disbelieving trance, Nessa leaped into action. She had already been standing to the right of the group, so it was easy for her to dart further around to the side. If she could keep the other rats at bay, that would give the others enough room to work on the monster. However, the monster didn't seem to like being surrounded. It swung its arm out and backhanded Nessa. The force of the blow hurt. The monster was strong too. She landed 5 meters away from where she had been. The sharp bone fingers had left 3 deep gashes in her left arm and 1 in her hip. She didn't have time to assess the damage. The rats were already on her. Nessa shot a vine along the ground to trip one of the rats, and then another to pin it to the floor. Then she flipped the spear in her hands and rammed the point down into the enlarged animal's eye. She looked up in time to see another rat use its fallen pack member as a platform. It launched itself at Nessa. "Nessa!" Taran shouted as she was slammed into the ground. He could make it over to her quickly, if only the monster would focus on someone else. This new beast seemed to be targeting him the most, probably because he was the tallest. He had dodged, dipped, dived and dodged again, trying to keep out of this thing's sweeping arms. He knew that even if he took a blow to his shield, the thing was so strong that it would simply lift him off the ground. So he had been moving with as much speed as his body would allow, in and out, slashing and stabbing with his blade, all to no avail. The hide on the rats was tougher than any natural animal he had encountered, and the beast seemed to have multiple layers protecting it. And protecting what exactly? This monster didn't have a heart, or any organs that were worth targeting. "Balanos, the eyes!" Taran bellowed. The archer was standing behind Artair, over to the left, and they were both attempting to keep their own group of rats at bay. Pausing, the old archer twisted and sent 3 arrows in quick succession toward the monster's head. All landed true, but the beast didn't flinch or seem to acknowledge the injury at all. Then Taran realized he had made a mistake. He had paused to watch Balanos work, which had left him stationary. The monster, unfazed by the arrows, reached out with its left arm and slashed at Taran. The bone fingers cut across his torso diagonally, easily passing through his padded tunic. The mail rings underneath bent and shattered, and from his right shoulder down to his left hip, Red began to seep through his garments. Seeing Taran stumble and fall to one knee, Artair launched himself in front of the monster. Lashing out with his grappling hook, he tried to get it to face him. Across the cavern, Nessa was still struggling with the 4 or so rats on her side, but at least she was still moving. Arrow, hook, sword, nothing seemed to be doing any damage. With the misfits distracted by the monster, it was easy for the smaller rats to attack. Balanos was being dragged from multiple sides, and one of the rats had Artair by the ankle, pinning him down so that the monster had free rein to strike. Realizing his peril as one of the massive arms came crashing down toward him, Artair rolled over the rat's back. The motion ripped his leg free and pulled the rat into the line of fire. The unfortunate rat turned into a paste as the arm landed like hammer on anvil. Artair had escaped certain death for the moment, but the rat's teeth had been latched onto his calf, and ripping free had clearly done some damage. He yelped as he tried to put weight on his bleeding leg. Stumbling, he fell, dropping his hook and knife and grabbing at his leg as pain shot through his entire body. First Nessa, then Taran, and now Artair had fallen too. Thalia's whimpers turned into outright screams. They couldn't defeat the monster, not with just her and Balanos. The rats were bad enough, and they were barely keeping them at bay. She had to come up with a plan, or this cavern was going to be their tomb. Attacking the monster had proven useless when the others had tried. She threw another rat into the air as she thought, maybe she could attack Netomna. He was, after all, what brought all these monstrosities to life. He was currently sitting on his dais by the stream, seemingly content to just watch the performance. If she could somehow get around the monster and over to the Rat King without being harassed by his minions, then maybe, just maybe, she would be able to achieve something. But what? She didn't have a sword like Taran, or even a dagger like Artair.
"Snap out of it, princess, and bloody help me!"
Balanos shouted, panic in his voice. The monster had decided that Nessa, Taran and Artair were no longer a threat, and it was coming right for the remnants. "Balanos, do you think you could get a shot off and kill the king?" Thalia pushed out with her mind.
"Maybe, if that monster wasn't in the way. If I could get under or over it, maybe,"
Balanos wheezed. The old archer had dozens of cuts and scratches from the onslaught of the rats, which were clearly taking their toll. The 2 of them had been pushed back to the far side of the cavern, and the monster was bearing down on them.
"Even if I could get a shot off, what then?
My arrows haven't been tough enough to pierce their hides. So I would need to get him in the mouth or eye." Their backs were against the wall now, and they could smell the fetid odour of the monster's breath.
"I'm good, princess, but I'm not that good,"
Balanos said, turning to look her in the face.
"Maybe you don't have to be, if we can work together somehow,"
Thalia replied. Whatever they were going to do, it was now or never. Nothing for it then, she thought, as she pressed her hands against the wall at their backs. "All right, I'll give you an opportunity, right under the beast's belly, but only fire once I'm clear, and I'll try and push on the arrow myself," Thalia said, desperation on her tongue. With a curt nod from Balanos, Thalia used as much of her channeling as she could muster and pushed off the back wall. She angled herself so that with the force of her magic, she soared up and through the air. She was moving fast enough that the beast didn't have time to swipe at her. Instead, it leaned back and stretched upward. Thalia sailed just over the monster's shoulder as its 2 mitts slammed into the roof. She heard the twang of Balanos's bowstring, and everything seemed to move in slow motion as the projectile emerged from under the monster. Thalia pushed out with her mind, wheeling the arrow forward with such great force that she lost track of its trajectory. As she soared across the cavern, Thalia locked eyes with Netomna as he stood up from his dais in alarm. In the blink of an eye, the arrow passed right through the Rat King's head and splintered into 1,000 pieces as it ricocheted off the opposite wall of the cavern. Smiling, Thalia didn't even notice that same side of the cavern looming toward her at a terrible speed. She slammed into the wall and heard a loud crack as her body slumped to the floor. For a moment, the pain was all she could think about. She gasped for air as she opened her eyes. Her arm was poking out at a strange angle, and her shoulder looked like it might be dislocated. She tried to scream at the sight, but she was too winded to make a sound. Thalia almost didn't notice that the monster had crumbled and the remaining rats had turned into regular-sized rodents. Lying on her back, she tried to lift her right arm, but it wouldn't follow her commands. She grabbed her wrist with her left hand. As soon as she tried to move it, excruciating pain lanced from her fingertips all the way up her spine. She coughed out a scream, and darkness took her. Artair watched as Thalia finally woke up. She sat bolt upright, and he had to force her to stay still so she wouldn't tear free of her bandages. "Easy now, you're all right," Artair said in between shushes. Once she'd calmed down a considerable amount, he explained to her that they were on their wagon and heading for the nearest town. "How did we get out of there?" Thalia asked. "Well, it wasn't easy. Taran is still unconscious, and you know how much he weighs," Artair said, leaning over to check on Taran. "With the help of some of the villagers and Brutus, we were able to use ropes and drag everyone into the crypt. Everyone except Belenos then got put onto stretchers." Thinking about it, Artair's leg throbbed with pain. "You're actually lucky you were still unconscious at that point. We eventually got everyone out, but Taran and Nessa are going to need quite a bit more time to get back to normal." "What do you mean, normal?" Thalia asked. "Assuming everything goes well, Taran will be fine. He has just lost a lot of blood. But Nessa," Artair said as he leaned over to check on the druidess, who was covered almost from head to toe in blood-stained bandages. "She's just resting now, and her wounds weren't that deep. It's just, well, the rats had her all to themselves for quite a while, and, well," he wanted to throw up just thinking about it. "They did a lot of superficial damage. I almost didn't recognize her when I was finally able to bring her around." The look on Thalia's face turned from shock to horror. "Still, we might be able to get her back to normal. I'm sure it will all be fine." Artair looked down. Seeing Thalia's now tear-stained face would be too much for him. "Hopefully, it will mean that our trials are over, though," Belenos shouted from the front of the wagon. "Think on the bright side, kids. 1, we are all alive, and 2, we have completed our tasks and are one step closer to accomplishing our goal," Belenos said, with more gusto than Artair thought should be possible right now. Artair sighed. "Great. Now we get a chance to kill arguably the most powerful channeler in the kingdom, and to cap things off, we also get to overthrow the king. How wonderful," Artair said, absorbing a little cheer from Belenos's attitude. "Almost certain death and a tiny chance of success awaits us. What are we waiting for?" Belenos shouted as the wagon trundled along the dirt path. The end. That was The New King of Morrow Marsh Part 3. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment any feedback you have, and consider subscribing as there will be more content to come. This was a Telltale. Thanks for watching.